Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today on another edition of Extreme Health Radio. I'm really excited about today's show. We have Amanda Love on, and she runs a website called The Barefoot Cook. It's going to be a really exciting show. So thank you again for joining us. This is Justin, and we are currently broadcasting worldwide from Southern California. So thank you for spending a little bit of your day with us to learn more about health and nutrition. Currently, we're doing about 3 shows per week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And for reference, today is Wednesday, October 31st, 2012. It's Halloween, and this is episode number 29. So you could find this show, the show notes, the transcription, and all the details at extremehealthradio.com/29. And if you have any questions for the guest, please email them to me at justin@extremehealthradio.com, and I will read your question to our guest on the air. Or if you'd like to call up, you can leave a voicemail at 949-391-7363, and I'll play your message to our guest. And I wanted to let you know this show is brought to you by the Vitamix blender, which is my favorite kitchen appliance. It's such a great machine. It's amazing. It does everything. So please check it out at extremehealthradio.com/Vitamix, and you'll get free shipping through us. And before we introduce Amanda Love to our show, I would like to just talk a little bit about our upcoming show schedule. This Friday, we've got Dr. Norman Shealy. He's a prolific guy. He's an author, written tons of books. He sees people from all over the world and helping heal people from diseases, and just a prolific, great guy. So you may want to listen to that. And then on Monday, we've got Dr. John Apsley, who is in his own right an amazing individual doing some great work up in Washington with cancer and detoxification, and just really doing some great work. So make sure to listen to that show. And then on next Wednesday, we've got Anthony Anderson. He'll be teaching us how to grow our own food and teaching us about permaculture and all of that great stuff. So, but today we've got Amanda Love, and it's going to be a really, really great show. She's a student of the Nourishing Traditions way of eating and preparing food. She's a chef. She does one-on-one nutrition consultations, workshops, classes, retreats, and in-home consultations. And she even has her own line of organic herbal tea that can be found on the shelves at Whole Foods markets. So thank you, Amanda, for joining us. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So you are in Austin, Texas.
Yep, I live in Austin.
Oh, excellent. I was there just a few years ago with my wife, getting my teeth redone by Dr. Stuart Nunley.
Oh, that's my dentist too. That's awesome.
Oh, really?
Yes, he's great.
He's excellent. What did you have done from him?
Just a teeth cleaning and general checkup.
Yeah, I had some mercury that was removed, and I have cavitations, and I've got a whole lot of problems in my mouth.
Oh, wow. Well, he's the guy to go to. He's really the expert. People come from all over the world to see him.
Yeah, he's really, really great guy. And his website, if you're listening to this and you're interested, it's I think it's Healthy Smiles for Life. Is that right?
I'm not sure. I think that's right.
Healthy Smiles for Life. Yeah, he's great. So Austin, Texas, have you been there your whole life, or you kind of travel around, or?
No, I've been here for the last about 8.5 years. I grew up in Texas, in Dallas area, and I left when I was 20, and I moved to Northern California, and that's where I really learned to cook, and I really learned about healing food and healing and nutrition and all of those wonderful things. And then I moved around and lived in some different places, Colorado, Utah, Hawaii, New Zealand, and then I made it back to Texas.
I'm half Kiwi, so you've been in my neck of the woods. Yeah.
All right. I love New Zealand.
Yeah, it's a great place. So when you left originally, did you go in pursuit of this kind of knowledge, or were you nutritionally aware at the time, or?
I was definitely somewhat nutritionally aware, but I was leaving to go and pursue more knowledge. I had the blessing of being raised by a pretty health-conscious mom and my grandmother, who has owned a health food store for 35 years and was exploring and trying different things to heal my own health, even though my mom was health conscious and fed me the best food that she could. It was really the best food that was available at that time. And there was no organic food. Back in the 80s, there was no farmers markets. There was no health food stores, really, where I lived. So I ate a lot of, industrially produced food. Mm-hmm. And that definitely took its toll on me since I was little. And so when I was 19, I did a study abroad in Italy. And that was my first taste of a different way of life, a different way of eating, a different way of relating to food. that really affected me. I came back with hunger to learn a different way to relate with food. Mm-hmm. And then the next summer I went on a cross-country bicycle trip. Wow. And I met a lot of people that were vegetarians, and that never even occurred to me before. I was from Texas. Texans eat meat. That's just how it is. And so by the end of that trip, I had changed in many ways. And I also became a vegetarian, a vegan, actually. Wow. And so I pursued that path for a while. And it eventually, it led me to California to doing social activism work and studying with Paul Pitchford, who wrote Healing with Whole Foods at Heartwood Institute, which is where I really learned to cook first time. And so that's the beginning. I could keep going, but that's the beginning of my path.
Okay. And so how long were you a vegetarian?
I was a vegetarian for about 3 years.
Okay.
And that was from when I was like 20 to 23.
Now, did you do the raw food thing too, or no?
I did, yes. Not that whole time, but I did. I was vegan and then vegetarian and then a raw food vegan. And so I tried pretty much the gamut of that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, you don't mess around, do you?
No.
Wow, I did the same thing. I did a raw food vegan for about 7 years, and so now I eat a little bit more like you do. So did you change from the raw food style, vegan type of style, to what you're doing now as a result of maybe some deficiencies you were having, or did you just do it out of some other reason?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, it's really a culmination of reasons. Just like my choice to become a vegetarian, that came from a culmination of reasons, learning about how animals were raised and all the environmental factors that are created because of consuming animal products or factory farm raised animal products. And the spiritual aspect, as well as political and just not feeling right about eating animals. Those were all really, important concerns to me, and it was really hard for me to go back to eating animal products. But my health took a nosedive. I became severely anemic. I couldn't think straight. That was the biggest symptom that I had. I just was totally in the clouds. It was really hard for me to carry on a conversation. I was really ungrounded. My cycle was off. I felt really weak and tired. I went to 3 different alternative doctors that even some of them were somewhat vegetarian or vegetarian bent, and they all told me, you need to eat meat. And so I took that seriously and had a hard time coming to grips with that. I mean, I was really committed to being vegetarian for life. It was really hard for me to go back, especially on a spiritual level. I really felt a lot of guilt about it. I was on this Buddhist path and, of taking vows of not harming and not killing. And so it was really a difficult choice. And at the same time, I began to learn about this whole other way of the interconnectedness of all creatures. And I also learned about Dr. Weston Price and all of his travels and what he found with all the people that he studied, that they all ate animal products. And that really affected me. And I'm so grateful that I found that information, because that is really what made things turn for me and turn my health around, really. Before I started eating animal products again, I really had an eating disorder. I was overeating like crazy. I just could not get filled up. And so I would totally binge on carbs. I mean, it was organic, food, but it was still just too much sugar and carbs. I was totally craving sugar all the time. I just couldn't get filled up. And as soon as I added butter and cheese and eggs and meat back into my diet, slowly I lost weight naturally. My natural eating rhythms were restored. I felt satiated after eating a small amount of food. I got my energy back. I could think straight again. I was no longer anemic. Wow. So everything really changed for me. And I'm glad that I went through being vegan and vegetarian. It was a really important thing for me to go through, to shed and release that old way that I grew up with, the old way of eating unconsciously, of not knowing where my food came from, of not being connected my nourishment, and choosing a new path of being respectful and honoring and really proactive about knowing where my food comes from, or growing it myself, or being, connected to get. So yeah, it's been a pretty big process for me. And it was also really important for me to go through that, because now I meet many people in that same situation that are vegan or vegetarian, and they're feeling kind of distraught because they feel that this is like the most ethical path. They feel that they're being socially responsible, environmentally responsible, and yet their health is failing.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that, I know at least for me, it helps to, if you start eating animal products, I feel like it really connects you more with the food, because when you eat only, leaves and stems and things like that, I find that, I could just go to the refrigerator and throw together a salad and wolf it down. But when I eat, maybe a steak or something like that, or some fish, I'm much more thankful and grateful for the food and for what God has blessed me with, and my life and the cycle of life. But when you eat a plant, it doesn't really, trigger that reminder for me to be more, respectful of the cycle of life. Do you find that as well?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it reminds me that all of our ancestors had great respect for the animals that they consumed, and had rituals and prayers and dances and many different ways to express their gratitude and their humility for getting to eat these animal products. And that's different. It's a really different feel than the vibe I experience with a lot of vegetarians that are sort of self-righteous about being vegetarian. I understand, because I was completely there myself. And just sort of feeling like, oh, I'm not a part of that system. I'm above that, or I'm better than, or disconnected from that, when I don't think it's really possible to truly be a vegetarian. I mean, even, if you're just eating plants and fruits, you're still eating microorganisms. You're eating them on the skin of your fruit. It's not possible to completely be 100% vegetarian. Right. Though people think that. Right. And I mean, subsisting on a grain-based diet can be argued to be more harmful than eating like grass-fed beef, where we're growing all this corn and soybeans that's using lots of pesticides and creating monoculture. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, that's much more harmful than raising animals respectfully in a smaller space.
Right. Did you have any issues with, because you said you did the raw food thing a little bit, and that's a lot of my diet still is raw, even though I eat animal products. But did you have any issues with, in the same way that you had when you first started eating animal products, you felt like, a little guilty. Did you feel that way in the same way where if you started cooking your food, you think, oh, I've heard that, I've been studying raw food and raw food's the way to go, and now I'm cooking my food. Mm-hmm. Did you have that kind of same issue there as you did with the eating of the animal products?
Yes, I did. These are beautiful questions. I mean, I've been through all these food trips in myself, and it was a major part of my life for a long time. For many years, I really struggled with these internal food trips and thoughts about how to eat, and that was definitely one of them. So I did struggle with heating up food and cooking food. I still eat a lot of raw food myself, but after time, I had to put all those thoughts aside, all those outside opinions, all the dietary advice or dietary paths aside, and just learn to listen to myself and my own body and what it really wanted. And that was not really one particular path. It was a combination of many different paths. But that's been a beautiful healing experience for me, is to just sort of let go of all that I've heard and really tune in to what this body wants and needs.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I ask is because I've gone through the exact same issues myself. And I find that as I continue, I think that there's a lot of stigma and dogma and emotion and ego involved in, which way to eat. And to be honest, I'm still figuring out what the heck I'm supposed to be eating. But I know that whatever I eat, if I eat it in a space of calmness and gratitude and thankfulness, peace, whatever I'm eating all of a sudden becomes better.
Yes. I totally know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, it's something that, I don't know, I think that there's a lot of stigma, but it's great when you learn things, because I feel like it kind of ups the bar and you learn something new and you get all excited and you get dogmatic for a while and then you can kind of let that go. So it's kind of a nice practice, isn't it?
Absolutely. I agree. I mean, I'm so glad that I went down all those dietary roads, because it's helped me to learn so much, and it's benefited my life as a nutritionist and as a chef, because I know so many different paths and different ways to eat and cook or prepare food, and I can relate to a lot of different people and where they're at.
Wow. So you see people, you go to their house and teach them, or how does that work? Yes.
Well, I have a couple of different services. One is I have people come to my office and consult with them there about what they're eating and how to create better health and wellness around their diet. And another service I offer is actually going to people's homes. I've been doing this for 13 years now, and every single time has been such an amazing experience for me. And I venture to say for the people that I work with as well. It's such a beautiful thing to turn someone on to knowing how to nourish themselves. And especially people that are older that never learned how to cook or prepare food for themselves. They get so excited and so grateful, and it's just such an amazing experience. So basically the first session I call the in-home kitchen detox session. And that's where we go through their kitchen and we just start cleaning out the junk. And this really has to be for people that want it, that are ready to do that. And sadly, I mostly get people calling that are already sick, already have disease. There's not as many people that call that are still well,
right.
Some, but not as many. And those people seem to really want it, are ready to purge the junk. So we start with the fridge, we just start going through it, and I get them to read labels. I explain why these certain ingredients are not good for you, and then we just start throwing it away or putting it in Goodwill pile or recycling, or not Goodwill, but food bank pile. Usually we get rid of many boxes of food. The largest load I've ever experienced with a client was 9 huge garbage cans.
Oh my gosh.
Like kind that are on rollers.
Wow.
The big daddy garbage cans. And that took several sessions because he had to wait for the garbage truck to come first to unload the garbage. So we start with the fridge, and then the freezer, the pantry, spice drawers, coffee, tea, cabinets. And it's amazing how many common similar ingredients there are in these foods. I mean, it's pretty much the same culprits. It's the white sugar, the high fructose corn syrup, canola, soy, cottonseed, or corn oil, or hydrogenated versions of those, MSG, soy in various forms, hydrolyzed soy protein, soy flour, soy milk, soys, and so many of these processed foods, white flour. Those are the main culprits that I see over and over and over in these corporate produced processed foods that are made by many of the same companies.
Right. We got to take a quick break, and I want to talk a little bit about some of those ingredients because I feel like they're probably really prevalent in just about everybody's kitchen, and they're killing us. So, and you know a lot about them. So we'll be right back with Amanda Love. She runs a website. Visit her site called thebarefootcook.com, and we'll be right back. Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you have been following our work for any length of time, you understand the role of beneficial bacteria. And I'm wondering if you have incorporated any fermented foods into your diet. There's a great course recommended by Donna Gates, actually, and it's called How to Ferment Anything. And you can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/ferment. And it teaches you how to make all of these amazing, wonderful fermented foods. And if you know anything about the role of bacteria in digestion, it's absolutely critical for you to have fermented foods in your diet. Every culture has had fermented foods as part of their staple in their diet for as long as you can go back and remember. So I highly recommend learning how to make fermented foods and incorporating these foods into your diet, because they are extremely powerful for helping you to digest your food, improve your digestion. And as you know, all disease begins in the colon. So having better digestion and increasing your load of beneficial bacteria is going to help you to prevent sicknesses and diseases, colds and flus, as well as more major diseases as well. So I highly recommend you learning how to ferment some foods, and they taste delicious too, just so you know. So check it out at extremehealthradio.com/ferment to learn more. Okay, we are with Amanda Love, the Barefoot Cook, and that's her website, thebarefootcook.com. And Amanda, before the break, you were talking about some of these white flours that people consume on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the dangers of this food.
White flour specifically?
Yeah, because that's pretty much, a grain-based diet, which is, pizza, spaghetti, and bread. And
right. This is a food that I find so many people are eating, and they're not even aware of how much that they're eating. It's like a cumulative effect of little bits throughout the day that is just gumming up their system, literally. I mean, what I tell people is to imagine that you're making dough, and remember how sticky it gets in your hands when you're rolling dough, and how hard that is to wash off. And when that goes into our stomachs, we don't have soap, we don't have hot water and hands to rinse that off. It just kind of gets stuck in our digestive tract and coats our digestive tract and impedes nerve flow from other organs coming in to get nutrition. It really gums things up. Not to mention, it's an anti-food. I mean, it's stripped of all of its nutrients, for one thing. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to digest because of the gluten. So it literally is like glue in the body. And it's also related to so many allergies. I mean, I find when people get off flour and gluten-based grains, so many of their health issues clear up. It's like, within a few days or a couple of weeks, their allergies clear up, their energy is better, they feel better in so many ways. And it's just something they weren't even aware of, what a haze or a fog that they were in. So if these grains were consumed properly, like our ancestors consumed them, they could be a healthier food. If they were sprouted, soured, made into sourdough bread, fermented, something like that, they would be a much more digestible, healthier food. But they're basically grown on fields with weak soil, with lots of pesticides, then stored for who knows how long, milled. Once they're ground, all the surface area of that flour is exposed to light and heat. And so most of those flours are rancid. And then they turn them into a product, some kind of, bar or cookie with this rancid flour and sugar and vegetable oils and all kinds of other junk products. And it's just, it's really an anti-food. And so it's also stealing nutrients from your body because the enzyme inhibitors have not been released. Like I said, if it were soaked at least, or sprouted, fermented, at least the enzyme inhibitors of phytic acid would be released. But when you eat a food that still has the enzyme inhibitors, it's actually going to steal your nutrients to digest it. It's really stressful to digest it. So there's a lot more I could say, but that's sort of the general lowdown that I share with people about white flour.
Wow. Yeah. And I've heard from Dr. Bob Marshall, who I'm sure you're familiar with. He was saying one time that the grain in our diet is responsible for the fact that just about everyone, when they get older, they shrink. They lose their height.
Right.
He was saying it was directly correlated to this grain that we're eating, which is just crazy.
Wow. Yes. And weight gain. I mean, to me, it's the biggest culprit of obesity we have in this country is all the white flour. It makes you doughy. It tends to cause weight gain. So especially in the quantities that it's being eaten.
Right. And then not counting the bromides that are in there and the fact that they've removed the iodine. And I mean,
exactly.
these foods are just so bad, aren't they?
Yes, really. I mean, it's just not the same food that people were eating 2,000 years ago. And I mean, even if you are not coming from a paleo perspective and you wanted to eat grains, wheat is not the same food that it was, and it's been changed. It's not genetically engineered right now, but it's been hybridized so much that it's a completely different grain, and it's much higher in gluten than it used to be. So, and one thing I see in my practice a lot is gluten intolerance. I mean, it's so common, and most people aren't even aware that they have gluten intolerance until they get off the grains.
Yeah, it's amazing what level of health you can achieve that you probably don't even know just by, getting off that stuff.
Yes.
So do you recommend people do a smooth transition to something like, what is that, rice pasta and things like that?
It depends on the person, really. I do muscle testing with people in my practice and when I go to their homes. And so I really help them figure out an individualized diet. Some people, depending on where they're at with their health or their disease or whatever, I'm pretty hardcore and tell them you have to stop eating these foods right away. And no grains whatsoever. And some people I find really do need some grains. Like I've put some people on the GAPS diet to get some major gut healing happening, and they feel really just sort of weak and have major blood sugar issues without any grain. So I found adding some rice and quinoa back to some people's diet has been really helpful.
Okay. Just to let our listeners know, in case they're not aware, can you explain a little bit about what the GAPS diet is?
Sure. The GAPS diet was created by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, and she based it on the specific carbohydrate diet, but she added other really healing elements that were not really on that diet, like bone broth and cultured vegetables and slow-cooked broth-based meat soups. And the diet was specifically created to heal autism. It's also been working for all kinds of other gut mental related disorders, ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, bipolar, schizophrenia, and heart disease. She has a book about heart disease as well, and has even claimed that it can heal type 1 diabetes. So the GAPS diet is basically consists of a person eating broth-based soups made with meat and vegetables, and making broth with bones and meat for weeks or months until their gut lining is more stable, more healed and sealed. The purpose of consuming all that broth is to really heal leaky gut, heal and seal the gut lining. And that's a really important thing to note. A lot of people come to me with these food allergy tests, and they're really concerned and frantic because the doctor told them, oh, you're allergic to these 30 foods or these 70 foods, or a long list of many foods. Wow. And this is just how it is. This is how it's going to be for the rest of your life. And that's really not necessarily true. Food allergies are often a result of leaky gut. And if you can heal the leaky gut, then you can heal the mechanism where your body is sending out antibodies to attack all of these foods that are coming into your system that it perceives as an enemy. So really the key is to get to the root of the problem and heal the gut, and then you won't have all those food allergies.
So what do you think is causing the leaky gut?
Well, it's the foods that we were talking about earlier. It's really the white flour, the white sugar, the refined processed vegetable oils. It's eating in a rushed state, where you're stressed, eating while driving, eating while you're watching CNN or something stressful, eating and talking about politics or fighting. When you eat in that state, you're not going to be releasing hydrochloric acid, which makes you digest your food. So then that food goes into your small intestine. It just sort of sits there and rots. And that creates a little hole in your small intestine lining. And the food goes through the hole in too big of a size. And then your body shoots out antibodies, which come and attack it and see it as a foreign invader. And so that pretty much creates a food allergy. So the key is to heal that whole problem in the first place, to get to the root of the problem, heal and seal the gut lining, eat soothing, healing foods, eat in a relaxed state. And the way the food is prepared also really makes a difference. That's one thing a lot of people don't really talk about. But cooking good quality meat with love, slow cooked or, just gently cooked, is completely different than charring your meat that was from a factory farm-raised animal and not really being present or mindful while you're cooking it and just sort of slopping it down without giving thanks. That really does make a difference.
So you're talking about more of an idea that is bringing us back to, as a culture, the way we're really supposed to be eating. And I guess that if you think about what we're doing as a culture, it's just absolutely crazy. Because if you think about someone who's stressed out and they go through something like a drive-through, which is completely a wild concept if you just think about it, and they go through a drive-through and then they're eating their char-broiled hamburger in traffic, stress, listening to Rush Limbaugh, it's like...
Yes, it's a recipe for bad digestion.
Yeah. Wow. So
and the digestion is really the root of our health. I mean, the gut is in the center of our body. It's where food comes in and then gets digested, assimilated, and goes in nutrients to the rest of our body. And if we're not doing that right, then we're not really going to have the best of health in many other areas. So to me, that's really one of the most important things to fix or to cure or to heal is your gut and digestion, getting that happy. And then I find everything else usually falls into place. So you still might have to do fine tuning with other systems, but healing the gut first is going to make the other systems work better in general.
Yeah, I've got 1,000 things I want to ask you, but I feel like we should stick on this healing of the gut because it's so prevalent in our society. And so what are some other things people can do to heal their gut, not including the things you've said? Well, one of them is eating food grown in the best nutrient-dense soil possible. Okay. Eating food it's grown in soil that's microbially alive, so they actually get that good soil bacteria in their gut and get lots of nutrients. And you don't necessarily get that just from buying organic vegetables at Whole Foods. You really have to search out the best farmers if you don't grow it yourself and know that they put compost and all kinds of good minerals back into their soil. Okay. So that's one of the most important things. The other thing is adding probiotic-rich foods to your diet on a daily basis. And this is something that all of our ancestors also did. Every single one of them, Dr. Price found, ate some kind of fermented or cultured food. And it was just sort of a byproduct of storing food for our ancestors. I don't know that they meant to make cultured or fermented food, but they had that food and ate it daily. And the benefit of that is that it's continually adding good microflora into your gut and beneficial enzymes which help you digest your food. So the Weston Price Foundation has the argument that even if you're eating cooked food, as long as you eat some cultured or fermented food, ideally with every meal, then you're going to be adding a lot of enzymes back into that food or into your gut to help you digest the cooked food. Okay, so now with the bacteria, is the bacteria considered to be part of your immune system? Yes. Well, it becomes part of your immune system. Yes. Basically, our gut is really where our immunity resides, and our immunity is made up of the good bacteria or the bad bacteria.
So the question is, what kind of bacteria do you have? If you have the bad bacteria, then you probably have a lower or weakened immunity. Mm-hmm. So if you can change that by adding all this good bacteria, those good bacteria are going to overtake the bad bacteria that really aren't doing good things for you right. and create a strong army, a strong first line of defense in your body. So then you can handle foreign invaders. You can handle pathogens, parasites, viruses, bad bacteria that might come in with the food because you have this strong army that is there fighting for you, that's, standing up ready to defeat any invaders.
So beneficial bacteria is critical. So we got to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about some of these fermented foods because I know you're a master fermenter, as they say. Yes. So let's take a quick break. We're with Amanda Love. Her website is thebarefootcook.com, and we'll be right back with Amanda Love. Hey there, thanks so much for listening to the interview so far. Hey, I'm curious if you have heard of a thing called the Conscious Parenting Summit. You can find it at extremehealthradio.com/CPS, and it's put together by Matt and Angela Monarch, and it's really been blowing my mind lately how it's possible to bring forth a healthy child into the world. And they interview about 20 different experts who have been doing this for 30 years, and it's been blowing my mind just what I'm learning. It's turning everything upside down as far as what I thought was normal in our culture. And in that summit, you'll learn about things like circumcision, vaccinations, ways to increase fertility, how to eliminate stretch marks, how to calm your baby, if you don't want to use diapers, you can actually do something where you can communicate with your child so they don't have to wear diapers. They'll let you know when they want to go to the bathroom. It's amazing. And water births and the role of doulas and midwives, how to have a home birth, the importance of skin-to-skin contact. I mean, it's just incredible. They talk about the dangers of C-section, breastfeeding, and it's just absolutely incredible. So I highly encourage you to check this out. If you want to get pregnant, or if you're struggling to get pregnant and you want to have the healthiest child possible, please take a look at this. It's extremehealthradio.com/CPS for Conscious Parenting Summit. So thanks for listening, and let's get back to this interview. Okay, we are with Amanda Love, thebarefootcook.com. And Amanda, before the break, we were talking about some of these fermented foods. And I am a huge fan of fermented foods. I eat them every single day. I try to get as many different types of fermented foods into my diet on a daily basis. But I was going to ask you, before we talk a little bit about how to make some of these things, do certain fermented foods have different bacteria and yeast cultures than other ones? Like maybe a kombucha versus a sauerkraut, or let's say you ferment a bunch of carrots and red cabbage versus carrots and white cabbage. Are there different cultures that happen?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are. That's a great thing that you asked, and I just want to point out that you mentioned you try to get as many different kind of fermented foods into your diet daily, and that's really ideal because they all have different kinds of bacteria and some have yeast strains, and that's really what you want, is to get as many different kinds of these beneficial bacteria and yeast into your gut as possible. So one is better than nothing. I find most people aren't eating any fermented foods, but to add more than one is ideal. So yes, for example, yogurt has between 3 and 5 bacteria strains, where kefir has between 30 and 50 beneficial bacteria and beneficial yeast. And they're different than the ones that are in yogurt. And so I say if you have a choice of the two, eat kefir instead, because that's got so many more beneficial bacteria and yeast. And yes, there is actually beneficial yeast. Most people hear the word yeast and they're like, oh no, candida. But beneficial yeast will help to take out the not so beneficial yeast in your body. And then like sauerkraut, cultured vegetables, those also have completely different strains of bacteria. And basically when you make sauerkraut or a cultured vegetable, you're using the bacteria that's naturally grown on the vegetable. It's called lactobacilli, and it doesn't mean milk or dairy. It's just lactobacteria. And there's thousands of strains of lactic acid or lactic bacteria. Mm-hmm. And so you're getting one or a few of those strains from the soil where that vegetable is grown. So that's another reason why you want to get the very best vegetables possible from the most amazing farm you can find with the best soil. Or you can use a starter culture, and I'm a big advocate of Caldwell's. Caldwell's created a starter culture that they took 15 years to isolate the very best strains out of the thousands that I mentioned of lactobacilli from vegetables, isolated those strains and made them into a starter culture.
Really?
And you can use that starter when you're making your own cultured vegetables. And they're the best cultures for like the best taste, the best texture, and it will work every time.
Wow.
So that's a difference between using a starter culture and a wild fermentation, which is where you just use the vegetables with their own bacteria and salt. And sometimes that doesn't work out. Sometimes it will mold or go off, or it just won't always work. So adding a starter culture will make it work every time.
Okay, and where would someone get that Caldwell brand?
There's a link on my website. If you go to my website, it's called Wise Choice Market, or you can just go to wisechoicemarket.com, and they sell the Caldwell starter as well as the Caldwell's cultured vegetables. And I've been to this farm. It's out of Canada, and these are salt of the earth people. Just, it's really good quality stuff, really high integrity product.
So do you make most of your fermented foods with a starter culture, or do you do the wild thing? Because I do the wild thing, but sometimes I throw like a capsule of the Chiodophilus in there. I don't know what I'm doing, but I just do it.
The wild thing, that's funny. Usually, well, it depends on what it is, because culturing it's simple in a way, it's simple in principle, but every cultured food has kind of its own personality quirks and it wants to be treated different. So I don't use a starter for everything. For making cultured vegetables, I usually use the starter because I know it's going to work every time. Where if I don't, sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't work. And the difference between adding like whey or a different starter is that it might have dairy cultures, which really isn't ideal for making a vegetable culture.
Okay.
You ideally want to use the vegetable bacteria that's naturally occurring with vegetables when you're making a vegetable culture.
Okay.
So this is controversial. There's some people that might not agree with me, but I've done a lot of research and talked to microbiologists and scientists and lactic fermentation nerds about this subject. So that's what I do. There's some people using whey, and I don't think that is the best way, no pun intended.
Okay, so
but
do you do...
It depends on what you're doing, really.
Okay, and so for kefir, where can someone get some kefir grains to start with if they wanted to do like a milk kefir?
Okay, so there's another link on my website on the resources page. I have a lot of resources. If you aren't writing any of this down, you can just go to the resources page. But Cultures for Health is a really great resource.
I'm sorry, Amanda, you cut out, or Skype just did a weird thing right when you said that, so sorry.
Okay, it's called culturesforhealth.com.
Okay.
Culturesforhealth.com is a great resource. They're located out of Portland. They sell just about every kind of culture you could ever dream of. And they have kefir grains or just the powder. You have the patience and time to have another little pet in your kitchen, because it is kind of like having a pet, taking care of kefir. Then I would suggest using the kefir grains because they're much more medicinal than the kefir powder starter.
Okay. Now, I've heard recently that someone shouldn't use like a full fat milk to make a kefir because a lot of the toxicity gets stored in the fat cells. And when you have the kefir going on with the full fat milk, so I was kind of not sure if I should buy the low fat, which I've always thought, fat is healthy. Why would I want to buy the low fat? Have you heard anything about that?
No, I mean, that doesn't really make sense to me. If you're getting good quality milk, if you know where it comes from, then it's going to be good fat. So yeah, that would be true if you were getting not good quality milk. But if you're getting good quality milk, then I think it's great to use whole milk and ideally raw milk. And it makes the fat more digestible too.
Right.
If you have problems digesting fat, which a lot of people do. So, having that fermented food will make the fat, or having it be fermented will make it a lot more digestible. So I don't really think that's true. If you have any research you can send me, I'd be interested in reading more about that.
Excellent. Yeah. So do you do any of the kombuchas as well?
I'm not doing kombucha myself. I've made it many times for years. The problem with kombucha for me and for a lot of other people is it tends to exacerbate a yeast kind of reaction, like candida sort of yeast. It's similar to kefir in that it's a combination of bacteria and yeast, and it's made with sugar. And if you don't make it right, then it can be left with too much sugar, or it can become way too yeasty. Mm-hmm. So like I was saying earlier, in theory, making cultured foods is simple, but it can also be a little complicated, and that there are particular methods to doing it right, to making sure it's really safe. Right. And kombucha is one of those things that can easily turn into a really high yeast fermentation. So if people already have yeast issues, and a lot of people do have candida issues, if they have gut issues, they likely have candida issues, then kombucha can exacerbate that. But some people feel amazing on kombucha, and I say listen to your body. Mm-hmm. And if you can, get muscle tested with it, because I find that's a really great way to find out right away if something's good for you or not.
Wow. So fermented foods is part of a holistic approach to diet, and your protocol is probably a huge portion, right? It
is. It is a big part of what I suggest people do on a daily basis. Yes. And as well as consuming broth. That's another thing that I insist on people doing on a daily basis, as well as green veggie juice. Mm-hmm. And I mean, those are like the three main things that I really insist on. I actually have a cleanse, and those are some of the main things that are on the cleanse. And then depending on the person, I suggest various amounts of meat and vegetables, and with some people, mm-hmm. some grains like rice, quinoa, millet, amaranth, those kind of grains.
Okay, so if someone were interested in that cleanse that you just mentioned, where would they go for that?
I'm going to be releasing that on my website soon. It's called the Nourishing Cleanse, and it's basically a culmination of all the dietary paths that I followed for a long time and learned from. It's really the best of those dietary paths and the most healing things from those different paths and what really works. Mm-hmm. So I've already tested it on many people and have had really great results with people just clearing up all kinds of issues and losing weight and feeling so much better and having more energy. And, a lot of people want to cleanse, but don't necessarily go about it in the healthiest way. There's so many cleanses out there, and it can be really confusing for people. Mm-hmm. So I've created a food-based cleanse that is very healing, but will keep your energy up so you can still work and function and do your daily life, unlike some cleanses that ask you to just fast or like only have juice or the master cleanser or something like that, mm-hmm. in which it's hard to, function normally and go to work and things like that.
That sounds interesting. So that'll be released on your website pretty soon?
Yes. I aim to have it out by the end of this month, if not sooner, by the end of November, that is.
Oh, great. Wow, that's great, because it's interesting, because I love your approach about, taking all the best things from different diets, because, I'm kind of entrenched as well in the paleo thing and then in the raw food thing. And you get people asking questions about certain foods, if they're paleo or not. And, and I think some groups don't include bone broths where the others do, and
right.
And so there's a lot of dogma and a lot of holding to certain principles, and I think your approach is so great, just being able to take the best of all, because they're all great. All, vegetarianism, veganism, they all have great things, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I know I hear what you're saying, and I feel like for me, I've arrived at this point where I'm not really loyal to one set path. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm aligned with the principles of mostly of the Weston Price path, and appreciate the principles of many other paths, but the dogmatism of even the Weston Price path and or that movement and other paths does turn me off at times, and I just keep coming back to the fact that we are all so different and we all need different diets. And it's just really humbling for me when I muscle test people and they all come out with different results. Wow. Not just on the kind of foods that they need, but percentages, like how much quantity of different foods. Some people might need like 20% meat in their diet, and some people might need like 80%. And so there really is no one size fits all. And that's the beautiful thing to realize is, you know, we're all different. There's no one way.
Right. It's so great to have that kind of mindset. So what do you think are some of the problems with specific ways of cooking? I know we only have a couple minutes left, but you were speaking earlier about, you know, slow cooking and, you know, there's boiling and then there's frying and sauteing. And like, what, in your opinion, are the healthiest all the way down to the least healthy ways to cook something up?
Okay, well, it really depends on what the food is. And I say prepare food until it's at its sweet spot, which is till it's like at its ecstasy of flavor and nutrition, that it's like pinnacle of deliciousness. And that's really how it wants to be cooked. So sometimes that takes experimentation, it takes trial and error to really figure that out. So, the most important thing I feel is entering the kitchen with mindfulness of deciding like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be here. I'm going to prepare this meal. I'm going to be here for it. I'm going to hold this space for this alchemical process to happen. I'm going to put my energy and intention into this. This is I teach a lot of people when I work with them in their homes and I teach them how to cook is to like, you know, really be present with what you're doing, because many people are not, you know, the phone's ringing, there's like the TV's on in the other room, there's like so much going on and their energy and attention is just like all over the place and not really present with what they're doing. So that is really what can make food taste good, believe it or not, is your intention, first of all. And then depending on what it is, you know, my favorite ways of cooking, well, okay, let's just start with meats. Basically, slow cooking is my favorite way. Slow and low is my general philosophy. So for a lot of meats, the typical protocol is to kind of sear it to seal in the flavor. So say you have like a big chuck roast and you're going to make pot roast. Basically, you want to like pat it with salt and rosemary and pepper, or like cumin, coriander, chili powder, turmeric, salt. Just pat in all those spices and flavors, and then you want to sear it in a pan with some pretty hot fat, like coconut oil or butter and olive oil or palm oil or even lard or chicken fat or something like that, and sear it on all sides until the flavor is sealed in, but it's also got kind of a crust on it. And this is something a lot of people don't do, which is really important. It's actually called the Maillard effect, named after this French guy. And that is the flavor that MSG is trying to mimic, is the flavor of browned meat. Wow. That's what makes meat dishes taste so good. So browning it is really the most important first step. Brown it, and then you turn the heat down and you let it slow cook for potentially hours or however long it takes until it's just falling apart tender. And cooking it slow keeps the proteins more digestible. It releases so much flavor. It's, to me, the most delicious way to cook. And that's mostly the way that our ancestors were eating too. I mean, there's occasionally cooking over an open fire, you know, just putting something out in the fire on a stick or something. And that can be really delicious too. But most of our ancestors cooked slow and low. So that to me releases the most amount of flavor. And you can do that in a crock pot. There are a lot of people are concerned about lead in crock pots, and there's a solution to that. You can get a crock pot called Vita Clay. It's made out of clay, vitaclay.com, I believe. And so there's no lead. It's completely completely safe materials inside. So I love cooking in crock pots because it just makes things so flavorful.
Oh, wow.
Or slow roasting or sauteing, but I always use good quality fats. And so just like your cultured vegetables, I suggest having a lot of different kinds of fat in your diet. And when I go to people's homes, I see they're pretty much using olive oil for everything, or just butter or margarine or other not so great fats. And so I recommend using as many different kinds of fat as you can. So getting in butter, lard. Save your bacon fat from slow cooked bacon. You wouldn't want to have that cooked at too high of a temperature. Save your pan drippings when you make some short ribs. Save the pan drippings. The drippings will solidify and become jelly. That is total nutrition and flavor for your next meal. And then the top part is going to congeal, and that will be fat. You can just save that fat and keep cooking with that, saute with that or sear. So you can save the beef fat, the pork fat, the chicken fat, schmaltz. That's something you can make. It's a traditional fat made with chicken and sauteed onions. It's a Jewish traditional food. Palm oil, coconut oil, duck fat. I'm sure I'm leaving a few out.
Geez, you're making me hungry here.
I know. So all of those fats have different healing properties. They have different ratios of omega-3, 6, 9, and it's really good to just get different ones in your diet. Wow.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for spending some time with us. And gosh, what a great thing. Do you have any books on your website, or do you have, can people contact you and work with you?
I don't have any books yet that I've written. It's in the works, but not out there yet.
Okay.
But yes, people can contact me. If they go to my website, there's a contact me page, and I do work with people over the phone or on Skype if they're interested. So they're welcome to contact me.
Wow. Would you mind holding on while I close out the show?
Sure.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. That was great. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today on Extreme Health Radio. I hope you got a lot of benefit out of this show. Gosh, I feel like I need to go eat. She made me so hungry. So thank you for joining us, and make sure to visit Amanda Love's website, which is thebarefootcook.com. If you found value in this show, would you do me a favor and click like on this show page? It's extremehealthradio.com/29. And maybe follow us on Facebook and share it with your friends and get the word out. That will help us grow the network and grow the show and help more people learn about their health and nutrition. And don't forget, we have a store with all kinds of really great products on our website. So visit our store and you'll be surprised. We've got digital products as well as e-products, all designed to help you out. So visit our store. And also, we are 100% listener supported. So if you'd like to donate, we would be greatly appreciative of that. That will help us keep our network free and help us become sustainable and all that good stuff. So, but if you can't donate, no problem at all. I just want you to enjoy the show and learn